Okay. So first, I just want to like talk about what you do with AI because I know like I read about how you do like learning in inclusive spaces with AI and like how like it like works for like disabled people. So I thought that was like a really interesting like connection. So I would love to know more about that
Great,
first of all.
great. So my research is in human-computer interaction. So we study both how people interact with computers and the surrounding phenomena around them. Now, computers could also involve AI, or AI could be part of computers as well. So relatedly, a lot of the research that I do is also on human AI interaction and how humans interact with AI. Generally, what most of my research, how it works is that there's some sort of a technology that's needed. So we do requirement gathering work for that, conducting interviews like what you're doing now, or doing surveys, some sort of like field studies, diary studies to understand if there's a need. Then figure out what type of AI is already available that can support that. So most of my research, as you mentioned, is on accessibility, and particularly accessibility of communication-based technologies or speech and language-based systems. And naturally, access issues around speech and language are usually an issue for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, deaf or hard of hearing, or there could be other sort of people as well for which it might be needed. So some of the AI technologies would be things like automatic speech recognition, which I guess if you have an auto transcribe on that's using, and that's used for something like captioning. Now a lot of people are also deaf, so they might not know English as well, or they might want to sort of consume content in their preferred language, which is sign language. So it is converting speech or text into sign language. So that's again another example. Sometimes people want, mostly in learning settings, some people don't have like high levels of English proficiency, so they would want text to be simplified, and AI can do that. So like the underlying AI is pretty similar to ChatGPT. So if you submit like I don't know like a Shakespeare's novel to ChatGPT, it can give it to you in like readable normal language. So language systems, accessibility of communication and language systems. That's what I work on. So yeah, my research usually involves doing requirement gathering, figuring out what AI is appropriate, designing a user interface or an experience around it. So some sort of an application around it, and then taking it back to the users and doing experimental evaluations with real users. So that's sort of like the high level summarization of my work.
Okay, yeah, wait, that's so interesting. Oh my God. So do you like, write these algorithms for these AI systems yourself?
Yeah.
Or like, I don't really know how that works.
Yeah, so no, that's a good question. So
yeah.
Sometimes, yes. So since my primary area is not on theoretical machine learning or AI.
Okay.
So we, for the most part, use off-the-shelf AI models. But sometimes a model might be for something different, and you want to use it for something else later on. For example, in my recent work, there are emotion recognition models that are used for a lot of different things. So emotion recognition for understanding speakers' intent, and so on. I use emotion recognition to convey emotions within captioned text. So that's like a specific application of that particular AI. Which would mean that it should be trained on data that is collected in those settings. So for example, if you want to caption movies in an emotive or an affective manner, then you would need data from movies. So you would be taking new data, retraining the same model, or customizing it, and then evaluating it. So that's sort of the part of it. I do teach and work in data science, which is sometimes used interchangeably with AI. So in data science, the models tend to be not as large as the models that you often think about in AI in most cases. So in AI, you were thinking about large language models with billions, if not trillions of tokens embeddings.
Yeah.
Which takes several days and like very large processes to build. In data science, we usually think about things like linear regression or logistic regression or algorithms, like basic algorithms that are used to work on data that's relatively like probably has like a few thousand data points as opposed to like millions and billions of data points. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's sort of my experience.
Wait, that's really interesting. Okay, so like when you're training these AI to help, like, are you inputting like data that you're like finding like for example, like if you were to do like trying to capture the emotions between like language barriers or something, like you'd say like okay, like you know, this is what I know about XYZ language, like, and then, like, you know, this is how, like, it would be interpreted in this way, and then, like, you find, like, a new way to sort of translate it properly. Is that, like, kind of what you do, or is it?
No,
yeah, I don't know.
Question. So at
Sorry.
some point, no, that's really fine. Yeah. And you said that you're not super familiar with AI.
I'm not super familiar with AI. Like, I mean, I use like ChatGPT and stuff, and like I will you know, like I feel like a lot of people like just like basically like train it like or whatever to like help them with like, whatever they're doing.
Custom GPT, I guess, or something of that sort.
Yeah.
So just to take like a step back, so earlier AI models used to be the simpler AI models used to be, as I mentioned, there used to be something like linear regression at some point, which is to say that give me 4 or 5 different factors. So give me 5 pieces of information about a student.
Okay.
And I can predict whether the student is going to attend the class or not attend the class. So, for example, I can know that what time of the semester it is. Are they an athlete or not? Do they sleep late? Do they, I guess, wake up early in the morning? How interested they are in the course? I get all of the 5 pieces of information, and based on these, and based on some combination of these, where each of these factors would be assigned with certain degree of importance. So, for example, whether they slept late or not might be more important than whether they are an athlete or not. So I would assign some sort of weights to each one of those separately. And based on that, you would come up with almost some sort of an equation that can give you either like a 1 or a 0, whether they would attend or whether they would not attend. Similarly, and if you generalize this to something bigger, for example, predicting whether something is a cat or a dog, you can give images, and it can take in properties of individual pixels from those images, and figure out if this is more cattish or more doggish, and give you like probabilities associated with whether it's a cat or dog. Now these were relatively smaller models. This can scale to something huge as well. So if you think about, for example, something like ChatGPT or language models, they're very complex, but on a very, very fundamental level, what they're doing is that they're trying to predict the next character given a previous character string. So for example, if I say that Tulane is known to be, the best school at Tulane is Dash. There might be tons and tons of data on this online. So people on Reddit might have said a lot of things. People on Facebook might have said on things. Tulane might have put something on their website as well. So what something like ChatGPT would do would be that it would have access to all that data, and it would try to predict what the next word or the character is given all of that. So I don't know, 10 people might have said business school, 3 people might have said medical school, 1 person might have said School of Public Health or something. So it would assign probabilities to all of those, and based on that predict what the next word would be. It sometimes even happen at the level of a character, so it might predict what the next character would be. So that's like these models scale from like predicting whether you would show up to the class or not, to cat and dog problems, to language. So that's sort of like how AI for the most part works. Now in terms of I work on all of these things in a different sense. So if the task is very complicated, for example, if the task is, as you mentioned, predicting emotion, now that's like emotions are very complex in general, right? So you can predict emotion from speech. Now even speech has a lot of different things. So speech can have amplitude, it can have pitch, it can have cadence, you can be excited, you can be calm. So there are so many different properties within speech that can predict emotion. If you're relying on someone's facial expressions, there might be stuff there as well, and so on. So you can imagine like we started from 5 different factors that predict something. Now we have like 1,000 different factors that are predicting something. And now all of these might even be in combination, in some sort of combination. And from there we might sort of scale into, I don't know, several thousand parameters that are going into making that decision. So in practice, how doing machine learning or applied machine learning works is that you take in data, there are already libraries and methods that can convert your raw data into those nice looking matrices of factors and their values, and those can be fed into a system, and then it would also have some sort of label with it. So for example, that data might already be labeled that this person is happy, sad, or you can use like a complex model or something of emotion to assign that. And based on that, it would predict that for a new image or for like a new sentence, whether something was positive or negative, based on that. So this is what we call supervised learning. There are also other types. By supervised, I mean that in the raw data you had both the labels and you had the properties. It's possible there are other machine learning techniques as well where you don't need the properties in and of itself as well, and it can learn or infer those. You don't need the labels too.
Okay.
Which is what we call unsupervised learning, and then there's reinforcement learning too, but those are separate topics. But yeah, so depending on what's needed, you sometimes need to come up with your own algorithms. You can also rely on libraries. So a lot of the work sometimes goes into feeding these libraries or black boxes of systems with data in a format that's readable for them, and that's usually in the form of mathematical matrices.
Wait, that's awesome. That actually is a great transition into a different question that I had. So, we're talking about wind and solar, right? And so this is going to be like a renewable source of energy that OpenAI could use in contrast to just, fossil fuels and non-renewable resources. So I think that the one major drawback about wind and solar is that it's so unpredictable because weather, if the wind suddenly stops, they're going to have to go immediately back to their fossil fuel stuff that they're going to have to, it's going to be really costly, pollute the air and everything like that. So I think that, based on what you're saying, that, OpenAI could already use its AI to predict possible weather patterns or, and stuff like that to I don't know. So how do you think that could look? Just based on the
predicting whether. Okay, so let me try to rephrase the question. So
sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Might help with understanding. So what you're saying is that using AI to predict weather events, which in turn could predict whether you would have a reliable source of power at a certain time as well.
Yes.
So that's I think I guess I can imagine people might already be doing that. So you could realistically you can feed in historical weather. So for example, if you're talking about, let's just say solar, and we have a panel somewhere in New Orleans, or we're doing this in New Orleans, we can feed, we have historical data from the past 50 or 100 years of which days are likely to be sunny. We might also have some data on what time of the day or how long the days are. For example, good luck getting sun at 6 p.m. these days now. Mm-hmm. It's dark super early. So might have some sort of data on the time of the day as well. Now, you might have some newer data that comes in every year as well. There's also other things for example, we get El Nino. So 3 years we get more rain, 3 years we don't get as much rain. So you can feed that as another factor in. And there might be other factors that are beyond all of this that we don't even understand that might already be going in. So you can use all of that to predict whether you're going to get a good amount of sunlight on that day or not. Now, whether something like ChatGPT can be used for that or not is a good question. So ChatGPT, for the most part, as I mentioned earlier, it's trained on internet, right? Mm-hmm. Does internet have all that information is sort of usually the question. So it's possible it does. It's possible it might still not have certain pieces of information because internet, you can read data, you can read live data, but it might not know as well, and it might have some forecasts, but it might not have all the pieces of information that so if your weather department might have about what's going on at that time. A lot of these models are also trained on data at a certain time, so they might not even be getting live data of that day from someone. So that's also another factor. It might also have some garbage information as well. So the internet might have certain things that might not even be important. So I don't know. There might be comments from environment deniers or people who deny environment change or whatnot somewhere on the internet. They'll be yeah, solar is a shit. Now, for those, that data is also there in the internet, right? And that goes into training these models. So that might give you more pessimistic answers as to whether it can be used or not. So it depends on what the training data is for this. For anything that's as highly critical as this, you would oftentimes create customized models. So you would, as I mentioned earlier on, so you would identify all the pieces of information that can reliably predict that, and create a model that assigns more weight to that information, as opposed to sort of like all the information on the internet what ChatGPT is doing. And that's, I think, also what like, for example, forecasting models do. Like we have those hurricane prediction apps, right, and all sorts of things. Yeah. So they're trained on more customized data and customized parameters as opposed to all the information in the internet, which is ChatGPT. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking, like, let me know what you think, but like the company can, internally, like, use some sort of, more focused algorithm to like really harness this different type of energy instead of just like using what they put out to the public, which is like the regular ChatGPT that uses like internet information. So I think that could be like a possible avenue that they could explore.
So are you trying to ideate what ChatGPT could be used for in this context?
Yeah. So like basically what we're doing with this project is we're just seeing like whether or not they should invest in wind and solar energy, like for like OpenAI should do it. Yes. So yeah.
For them, there's more incentive as well, right? So I can pull out the number, but just to do one iteration of training of GPT-4 or GPT models, can you guess how much electricity cost would there be, or?
Okay, if we're asking for like numbers right now, like I just know that they use a lot of electricity. Like I don't know like how to quantify that very well. Yes, but like just
dollars.
Lots.
Yeah,
like
so billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So and there isn't of course I think there's a lot of backlash and a lot of people rightly so think that this much energy. Is it worth it spending such energy?
Yeah.
So they can, even their training processes, or the hardware or the infrastructure that's needed to train these models, needs a lot of energy. So there should be that should be there. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, so I think I talked about AI in a lot of detail. I didn't talk much about the hardware part or what's actually needed for that, right? So for something, when we were talking about whether someone would show up in the class or not, linear regression, that's something you can do on Excel, like just an Excel sheet or like an advanced Excel sheet. You can do that. Predicting cats and dogs, you can do that on a computer with like a CPU. As the size of the model becomes bigger and bigger to something like the entirety of the internet, you need more specialized computing equipment. So you need what we call GPUs. You need something even bigger like clusters. You need clusters of clusters. You need a lot of compute power, because it's trying to extract information from something that's so big. Like if I'm trying to predict the next word based on the entirety of the internet, now I need to the program needs to read the entirety of the internet, wherever it sort of does. Like or even in the pre-trained model as well. So that requires a lot of compute power. So if it requires like a lot of compute power, then so that's their incentive to invest in renewable energy. So to be able to do more computation, especially as the models become bigger and bigger, which seems like the direction that we are going in, especially with deep learning. So they can invest a lot they can benefit a lot from investing in these companies to make it more more usable.
Yeah, for sure.
Another thing which is more of like from a user standpoint, there would also be benefits. So especially in the field areas that I work in right now, a lot of people are thinking that if language-based interactions would become like the norm of how people interact with computers or systems. So right now, or like maybe, I don't know, like a year ago, when you would be given some sort of an assignment and if you would go online to search for it, you would have gone on like Google Scholar or university's library, and all sorts of those places. But now, if you need information, the quickest and fastest way is just type it into ChatGPT and use that as even if it's like substandard, that's like the starting point that you go for. So it's possible that even when people are consuming news about their environment, or people are or about whether like solar is useful at that time or not, or when it's useful or not, they might want to ask open-ended natural language questions as opposed to going on like a specialized website where they can do something.
Okay.
Yeah. So someone might be interested in just going to something like ChatGPT or something and asking, is this hurricane going to hit us or not? Or is this, how's the day going to be today? We're already seeing this. So on both like Apple Weather app and then also Google's Pixel weather apps, they do now give like an AI generated weather summary of the day. So it's something like, so today is going to be pleasant early on in the day, because weather is also like a very dense information, right? So it can start raining in 15 minutes, it cannot rain. Even the chances are sometimes hard to interpret, because the chances are more chances over a large area for a certain period of time or whatnot, which people, for a lay user, is not easy to interpret, right? So people might even be interested in tracking weather events based using natural language. Like, just give me like how the weather person used to tell me weather, and I don't want to go to the website. So that's again another thing that I think people who are tracking weather events for power generation can use language models for. So I guess that's another like a very long distant way of where it could be useful.
That's really interesting. I haven't seen the like AI on weather stuff. Yeah, I haven't. I don't know. Maybe like I haven't updated it enough or something. Like I don't know.
But I use a Pixel. I don't know if but it's let me see if it's showing. But so when I open weather summary, it usually
oh wow! Oh my god!
And it will give you some sort of report for the entire day. Yeah.
Wait, that's
because
really interesting.
Because this is too much information, right? Like I don't want to manually process all
this
information.
Yeah.
So I guess people who are working with those wind turbines or solar might also benefit from more like easier summarization of what the weather conditions are going to be and predict how much energy they can generate. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. I didn't think of like it going. I don't know. Like I didn't consider that. That's very, very cool. You've answered like so many of my questions already with just like a few explanations. But like this is kind of like what we were talking about already. But like in the future, do you think these tech companies like OpenAI are gonna completely rely on like renewable resources and stuff like that in the future? And like I don't know. Like we'll talk about other future questions related to like just like AI and like how it's gonna impact stuff. But this one's a little bit different, but
I think this is more of a policy question.
Yes.
So, it would depend on. It's a hard question to answer. So, I guess it would depend on whether the government would make them do it.
Okay.
Or whether the government would be fine with it. It would depend on cost as well, I guess. So if like fossil fuel or like the normal electricity that they're getting is too expensive, they might need to consider getting into sort of like some of these renewable energy forms. Another one is more like proximity to places where they can generate these powers, like this sort of power. So I can imagine, like for example, if there's a tech company in Seattle where it's cloudy for like 8 months in a year, they probably, unless they figure out a way to get electricity from somewhere else, or they run their computing infrastructure somewhere else, they might not be able to do that.
Yeah.
Or if it's somewhere where you don't get like a lot of wind, so you might not be able to do that. And so it would depend on geographical factors as well. So I guess it depends on whether the government makes them do their own funding model, there's geographic constraints. At some point they have to, right? I mean, I don't know if you can just keep scaling and relying on like just the normal energy sources. So I think at some point they probably would.
Okay, thank you so much. Last thing, kind of just to summarize, so like a framework that we learn about in our class is like a hold, go, or like no framework. And so basically like if it's a hold, it's basically gonna be like, okay, we're gonna like keep looking and tracking and like seeing how these industries are doing and whether or not it would be like a good fit for OpenAI to invest in wind and solar. And then go is just like to yes, go invest, and then no is no, don't do it. So like what do you think, like what's your opinion on
of whether or not they would do it?
Or whether they should or not?
I think they should go for it.
Okay.
They should. So if were to ask me,
if
they would is another answer. That's probably something that only like Sam Altman or some of these like,
Yeah.
CEOs of these
For
companies.
sure,
No,
for sure.
For now,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think they should. Yeah.
Okay.
It's sustainable. I don't think so. You can keep training. Can't keep getting $2 billion bills and
Yeah.
growing, right? So
Uh-huh.
I think they should.
Okay.
Like a short answer. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I think this concludes like all the questions that I have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really appreciate it. I feel like this is a very productive conversation.